Hello everyone and welcome to Tidgney's GT Sport Driving School. Here we are with episode number 5 and it's all about understeer, oversteer and actually how to catch that oversteer and how to stop understeer. We're going to combine it all into one. Now we've looked at 4 different things up to this point: braking, accelerating, cornering and then weight transfer. And each one of those can actually cause understeer or oversteer. Now, one philosophy I've always gone by, and I found this episode of Top Gear amazing, was when Jackie Stewart was training James May to get him quick at Alton Park in the TVR. Now, one thing he said was, he pushed James May and James May fell back. But then when he went to push him again, James May leant into the hand of Jackie Stewart. So Jackie Stewart. And in that moment, he said that because he knew it was coming, he prepared for it. And it's the same sort of thing in GT Sports. If you know oversteer is going to come, for example, in the Manufacturers' Cup, in the Audi R8 Group 3 car, I know oversteer is going to happen quite a lot. So I'm more prepared for it than if it was to suddenly happen. And because I know that as the tyres wear, it gets worse, I then prepare for it more often and then can react accordingly to stop that oversteer or potentially react to something that I know is going to happen. For example, if I run on the grass, potentially the car oversteers, I then use techniques to stop that oversteer to stop me spinning out. Exact same principle. It's the philosophy I've used all the time with GT Sport in any racing game, in fact. And it's what happens in time trial laps. As guys get quicker, the laps get a lot smoother because they know what's going to happen to the car. They know they can apply that 1% little bit more throttle and the car won't react too badly. If they add 10%, potentially the car spins. And you learn this. This is why the GT Academy has always been amazing, because the lap times start here and at the end of day 1, everyone's like, that's it, it's done. Best lap's already done already. And then by the end, we've still gone up here. We've still gone higher. There's never a perfect lap, and you've always got to remember that. So, in this video, we're going to look at understeer, oversteer, how to catch a car, how to stop understeer. We're going to use examples that I've got video footage of from my races throughout 2018. No more spreadsheets in this one. I know there's a lot of spreadsheets in the last one. So, I think we'll kick off with the first part of the video, understeer. So here we have the Audi TT Cup car. Obviously this is front wheel drive and the most common form of understeer occurs with front wheel drive cars. Obviously we've got other little aspects of understeer, but this is the most common. So we start with this and we'll talk about the others in a second. Now obviously we have talked about accelerating in previous episodes, and this is what it is. We're going out of corners, we're planting our foot, but the front wheels of the car can't turn and go full throttle at the same time. So if you notice here, every time I come off the throttle, the car turns. Every time I go 100%, and I've been very extreme with these inputs, the car just understeers straight off. And again, if we come into this corner here, we plant our foot again. Look, the car cannot get round. I have to keep letting go of that throttle to try and make the turn. Now, obviously, as I've just said, this is because the front wheels can't put 100% power down and also can't turn the car at the same time. Remember, there's a lot of horsepower going through those wheels. The wheels can only do so much, the car can only do so much. And as you've seen here, we're getting a lot of understeer each time we put our foot down. So we can combat this, of course, and I'm going to show that in the next clip. But again, just to demonstrate this, coming through here, you can just see I'm going to put my foot to the floor here. I'm not going to let go, and you just see the understeer here. The corner goes away from me, and then I hit the barrier. So obviously, this is a significant issue. So let's start again with the Audi TT Cup car now. Let's show you what to do. Now there's 2 things you can do in terms of front wheel drive cars. Obviously the first is literally don't put your foot to the floor, try and straighten up as quick as you can and then put your foot to the floor. Obviously in the last episode I talked about weight transition and balance. So you'll want to slowly build the throttle. So if we come into this corner here, notice how I'm slowly on the throttle there, 50, 50, 50, 75 for a little bit and then 100. That is what you should do, As I'm releasing the steering, I'm allowing the throttle to go down a little bit more. So basically, like I showed in the accelerating episode, the wheel can only do 100%. We're not going to go to spreadsheets this time. The wheel can only do 100%. So if I'm getting understeer from accelerating out of a corner, the first thing you should look at is your inputs. Am I trying to do 100% lock and 100% steering at the same time? And is that causing an issue? Obviously this is going to be drivetrain specific in terms of the front wheel drive car. So you can do that and that's absolutely fine. Now in addition to that, and you may have just seen that, and as you can see here, I'm really low in 4th gear in terms of the revs. So what you can also do is actually be lower in the gears and have the ability to turn the car a bit more. So why is that, you're probably asking? Why can you suddenly go full throttle and turn in that lower gear. So here we have the Audi TT powertrain on the right hand side. So if you actually look, we don't get peak horsepower until the end. So if we're at the top of the rev range, we're getting peak horsepower. That is when the wheels can't handle it. So if I'm lower in the gear, I can actually accelerate 100% and have no issues. So you will see me in races go for the higher gears in this Audi TT RS, just so I can get around the corner and accelerate at the same time and not worry about tyre wear so much. It's much harder to control and manipulate that throttle at different positions as you release the steering over just hitting 100% in a front wheel drive car and just being in a slightly lower gear. Of course, as I just said, you've got to be careful with wheel spin and everything else in there, but key things here: either choose a lower gear, choose a higher gear and stay lower in the rev range. And if you can't judge your throttle input very, very accurately, alternatively, just don't accelerate out the corner or do it very softly, so 25%. Just keep it balanced there. You're maintaining the speed, and then when you've made the apex and you can make the exit as well, then start increasing the power to the car. So that's sort of power understeer. The most common in a front wheel drive car, not so common in other cars, but let's look at the next one now, which is understeer under braking. So here we are in the Aston Martin Group 3 car, and we're going to demonstrate braking and understeer. And again, it's similar to accelerating. Tyres can only do so much. So we're going to come into this first corner, we're slamming on the brakes here, we're trying to turn at the same time. We get nowhere, we don't hit the apex, we run wide, and even more so, you can see some weight transfer happening there. We go off the brakes onto the accelerator. The car doesn't know what to do. There's a big pendulum effect there. We lose the rear. Again, we're going to come into this next corner. Again, demonstrate the same thing. Slamming on the brakes, trying to turn in. It doesn't work. Tyres can only do so much. The car can only do so much. Because, of course, downforce has impacts here as well. So, in this instance, what I would do or look to do is to look back at the braking episode here. How can I reduce that understeer, but also maybe brake into the corner to try and maximise the braking distance? And it's trail braking, of course. That is how you solve it. Again, we're going to just slam on 100% here again, just to show you. It's not helping the car in the slightest. Another wiggle there as the weight moves around due to the extremes of what we're doing. Let's now go to a good example of how to combat this understeer. Obviously, braking 100% and turning does not work. So your choices are to trail brake, like I show here. I dropped to 50%. I went a little bit wide. I just carried too much speed into the corner. We're going to get onto that type of understeer in a second. But even so, I could brake and turn. You can hear the tyres weren't screeching as much. So obviously, I'm actually managing that understeer under braking. Again, trail braking in. We're hitting apexes now. Absolutely no problem. So here, if you're struggling with trail braking, I would make sure you're braking before the corner and then releasing the brake. Otherwise, trail brake. They're the two options you have to try and reduce this amount of understeer, because you cannot do 100% braking and 100% turning. It's not possible. Trust me, it is not possible. You've seen that in these examples. So they're the two ways you can actually solve that issue. Now let's move on to understeer. That is a little harder to identify. So we're now in the Mercedes SLS Group 3 car, and I've picked this car because it will understeer slightly bit more anyway, just due to where the weight is in the car. Big front end, of course. So there is an understeer, or type of understeer, which is much harder to identify because you're not necessarily in a front wheel drive car and you're not necessarily paying attention to it, and you look at other replays and you go, well, they do that speed, so why can't I do that speed? And it's all about apex speed. So it is sort of carrying too much speed into a corner, but it's hard to identify because you're not braking that much or you're not accelerating that much. I've not really done it at the moment. We're about to start approaching this. So as we approach this next corner, I'm going to brake and turn in, but you're going to notice I get understeer. So as we come into the braking zone, we brake, we turn in. Notice how we're carrying too much speed. We don't get anywhere near the apex. It's not a very good corner. And then we continue on. And again, I wanted to show this aspect as well with the S's. So we come into here, we then start accelerating, and then doing full accelerating, similar to the Audi. We lose the rear end a little bit, but again, you can see the understeer. I'm turning left there. The car doesn't want to turn left. You could say that's like in the Audi, front wheel drive problem, but in this situation, it's rear wheel drive car. The front wheels, all they're doing is turning. So it's all about identifying when you're carrying too much speed in a corner, and it is a difficult task. I'm not going to say it's easy because it's hard. And when you look at top 10 replays and they're potentially going even faster than you, and you're like, well, how are they doing it? So it's something to be aware of. So the way I sort of counter this is to actually start slower. Build up the corner speed and try not to focus on apex speeds too much if you're struggling with understeer. Just try and back it off a bit. Go slower into the corner and then start building it up. So we're going to come down towards this right-hander again. We're going to brake and we're actually going to carry a little bit less speed. It's about 2 miles an hour less speed, 77 versus 79. At a point I snapshotted it, and I'm going to show you the snapshot after. Again, coming into here, we're going to come in and we're actually going to go slightly slower again. Now on this corner here, I snapshotted it here, and again it was 2 miles an hour different. So you can see 2 miles an hour potentially makes all the difference, because we're now getting around this corner absolutely no problem. So let's go to those snapshots. So the first one here, you can see 79 on the left. This is the one where we've understeered. It's snapshotted in the exact same place, but on the right side we're doing 77. So we're going slower to go quicker. Now that sounds completely crazy, but it's something you potentially have to do in a car. Now, the one thing I have seen in GT Sport from a lot of people who were really quick in GT6 is that they were being too aggressive into corners. They were braking too late and trying to carry too much speed. And then they had this issue. So then I've gone to this corner, and now I'm taking a slightly different line. So in theory the 110 should be valid for the left-hander. We get a bit of weight transition in there, but we couldn't carry it. We're 108 on the right, so you can quickly see we've lowered that apex speed by 2 miles an hour, and I've snapshotted it in the exact same place, exactly 3 across on the light, the white sort of bits on the red. I've done it in the exact same place. We're always 2 miles an hour down, so we're carrying less speed in the corner to go faster. We're getting a smoother line, smoother drive. The car then becomes a little bit more consistent. And as I say, we're going to talk about consistency in a different episode. But to stop that understeer, I've brought it back. I slowed down the corner. I'm just slowing down that little bit more to make sure I'm not carrying too much speed in the corner. Potentially, I can carry 110 miles an hour into that corner, but I'm not making it at the moment, so bring it back to 108 and then I'll start building it up. So keep that in mind. If you are struggling with understeer, you keep going wide on corners, just bring it back. Slow down the car that bit more and then try again and then start to build it up. Very hard to identify that sort of thing, especially when you start looking at top 10 replays. So in my opinion, always start slow, build yourself up. Don't start quick because you're going to struggle then. You're going to get too aggressive very quickly and not make any progress. Now there is one final bit of understeer, which is dirty air, so let's have a look at that now. So here we are with the Nations Cup Round 7 from the final season of the FIA Championship in 2018. Now we're in Group 2 because Group 2 is a classic demonstration of dirty air. If you race these cars, you have experienced dirty air at some point. And instantly to note how bad dirty air is going to be, look at slipstream. Look at the start of this slipstream. So straight away, you can see I'm catching up to Adam. Now look at this first corner. Really pay attention to my inputs here. So we're going to approach this first corner. We're doing about the same speed. As we turn in, notice how the car starts to understeer. And then unlock the wheel a bit more. Obviously that causes a bit of oversteer. We'll keep that in mind for a little bit. We approach the next corner. This time Adam's going to run slightly wide here, but notice now I've got a lot of clean air and I can suddenly gain a massive amount of time there because I've taken the corner properly. I'm not suffering from dirty air. Here again, look at this. Adam took a slightly different line, but again, dirty air having an impact. So how do you stop understeer from dirty air? Now it's very hard because obviously you want to take the line of least resistance, which is the racing line. But sometimes it's not actually possible, and you'll see occasionally in this clip, you may have seen it just before, that I will take different lines, slightly different lines to try and avoid dirty air and understeer. But you can't always do it. Don't get me wrong, you cannot always do it. So keep that in mind when racing. If you're right behind somebody, it may be worthwhile you taking a slightly worse racing line or worse line in the corner to actually stop the dirty air, depending on how impactful this is. Straight away you see Jomas going through into me there, and instantly I'm having to slow down the car. Going through here, we were doing the same speed, but look at the dirty air. It's just pushing me out wide more and more and more. So the critical thing here is, yes, there is dirty air. Yes, it does cause understeer. It also causes oversteer as well because you're turning the car more, which obviously means the car will eventually oversteer with the weight transition more and more and more. And of course less air resistance hitting the downforce of the cars, because remember the Group 2 cars are very downforce heavy. Less resistance air hitting that car, hitting the aero less downforce makes the car a little bit slippier. So dirty air doesn't also cause understeer, it causes oversteer. But try and get out of those lines if you can. Try and avoid being right behind the car, taking slightly different lines. Even if you get a tiny bit more air on the car, sometimes it's worthwhile to get round the corner. So keep that in mind in terms of dirty air. I only wanted to cover this very briefly. And I've mentioned oversteer in this one, so let's start looking at oversteer. So obviously we're going to go to the Audi R8, of course, Group 3 car. It's very oversteery, and there's several types of oversteer to look out for, which I've explained in previous episodes as well. Now, of course, you've got power oversteer, and then you've got, as you can see in here, where the weight is shifting all over the place. So as you turn in, you're just going to get that oversteer. Lift off oversteer, it's all weight transitioning in the car, basically. That's what it is. So as we approach this hairpin coming up, we're going to get a bit of oversteer just due to hitting the curb slightly, a bit of weight transition in there as we come through. A little bit there, and then a bit more on the power, on the accelerator. So how did I conquer that? Well, one of the things to look out for very quickly, and it's something that Jan Mardenborough's pointed out as well in terms of going from sim racing to real racing, is that as a sim driver, you do not have feel of the pants, as you would feel in real life. I've oversteered a car in real life, I've drifted a car in real life, I know what it feels like to oversteer a car. If you don't have that feeling, how do you spot it? It's all to do with the camera angle. So if you look at the camera angle, and we'll jump back to that oversteer moment now, just look at the centre of the screen here as we come into this corner. Just watch it. There we go, you just see it instantly start to rotate a little bit more. Now most of the pro drivers, whether they know it or not, are looking for that quick reflex. Just look at it in slow motion now. Watch the camera start to over-rotate and the car over-rotate. Essentially rotate faster around the corner than you expect. So we're coming into the corner, absolutely no problem. Come around there, look at the camera start to then go. So instantly that reflex of catching the car, get the car back. Just like that, and it's the same in any car. You instantly get that momentum. You can see the camera start to rotate a little bit quicker than you're expecting. You quickly react to the car. So we jump back to Group 2 now. I'm at Fuji, obviously one of my favourite circuits. So we're just going to look again at how the oversteer happens and look for that camera movement. This is how you catch it, because yes, it'll eventually come through the wheel, but your eyes are quicker to react than the feel of the wheel. Trust me on this. And this is where some people might want to train their reflexes a little bit. Look for the reaction. So we're going to come into this corner, this left-hander. As we come in here, power instantly. You see the camera start to over-rotate and then go to catch it. So in this instance, the way I caught the car, because there's one sense of seeing the oversteer and how to catch it. In this instance, I just came off the power. It was a bit more power oversteer than weight transition. We caught the car. We accelerate on down the circuit. So we're going to do the same corner again. And again, I want you to look at how I react this time versus the last time. Because yes, I caught the car last time, but it's how I react the lap after and how I solve that oversteer. So again, we're doing the same corners. We're doing the exact same thing here. And we're going to come into this left-hander. As we come in, we accelerate. We're a bit more prep fit. We see how we jerk the wheel a little bit. We're already preparing to catch the car before it starts to oversteer. Now this is going back to the very beginning of the video that I was on about, where James May and Sir Jackie Stewart were talking about preparing for the car's reactions. I was prepared for the car to oversteer this time round, so I was already going for the counter oversteer as I put the power on. Therefore it didn't oversteer as much, I lost less time, and essentially I still caught the car even though it doesn't look like I caught the car. Now there are a few more aspects to it, of course consistency, which we've gotten into a separate episode, but again, as I said, James May, Jackie Stewart, it's the perfect conversation in how to catch oversteer. If you're prepared for that oversteer and you know it potentially is going to happen, you can counteract that before it does happen, or counteract it just as it starts to happen and it's not extreme. Whereas on lap 2 you saw it, I started to oversteer, a big oversteer moment, caught it, lost a little bit of time. So we're back to the R8 Group 3 car, and this time we're in an FIA race once again. It's in the exhibition series, and we're at Suzuka, obviously a circuit which has a lot of turns in and the potential of a lot of oversteer, and there was lots of oversteer in this race. But I've jumped to lap 8 in particular at this point in time mainly to look at one particular moment, because as I just said, oversteer can be predictable, you can prepare for it in advance, but sometimes it's not predictable and sometimes you have issues when it occurs. So at the moment we're behind Nisman, so obviously we're going to experience a little bit more understeer initially. So as we head towards Tidgney 1, watch what happens. We're going to run a little bit wide. As we head there, if you notice the brake and accelerator inputs, they both happened at the same time. So very similar to the braking episode where I said to stop oversteer into a corner, you can potentially brake and accelerate. To stop the oversteer there at the exit of Tidgney 1 going to Tidgney 2, which will happen, touching the light green stuff and potentially the grass as well, I hit the brake and tapping the accelerator at the same time just a little bit, and I'll just rewind that in a second just to show you that that stopped the oversteer. It basically stopped me spinning and keeping me in this battle with Nisman. So as we rewind here, we're going in half the speed basically. So again, I want to really focus on the brake and the accelerator here, right? This is the critical part. So as I come into here, I'm just going to suffer a little bit of understeer. I'm pushing as well. And then as I come into here, notice how I get a bit of oversteer there. And the car's moving all over the place. And then I dab the accelerator. I'm just dabbing the accelerator while 100% on the brakes because I have to brake for Tidgney 2. And yes, we lose time to Nisman, right? There's no question about that. But we only lost a little bit of time to Nisman, and we basically saved a spin, which would have lost us tons of time to Nisman. So keep that in mind. If you ever run wide, you go on the grass, going into a braking zone, and the car starts stretching itself, moving, and you know it feels like it's going to spin or oversteer. Again, as I mentioned in the episode with braking, as I've just demonstrated here, put on the brakes, but apply a little bit of throttle, a little bit. That's all you need to make sure you stop that car spinning. You create understeer and stop oversteer. That's literally what that technique does. Stops oversteer, causes understeer, and at least you make the corner and you don't brake on the corner. And when I mean brake, I mean smash off into a million pieces. So now I'm going to rewind it a little bit in this race. Go back to lap number 5. So this is the end of a stint, and as you can see in the bottom left hand side, the tyres are pretty much gone. And now obviously oversteer is going to occur in this situation. Well, this first corner, for example, we're trail braking in. You're going to start to see the car moving a lot. There you see a little bit of over-rotation, but we kind of like the over-rotation into the first corner. It's fine. And then you can see the car the camera sort of snap back straight away. As we come through the S's, you can instantly see now the car is wanting to over-rotate. And you just start to see the camera start to overextend itself a little bit. As I was explaining earlier, these are the key things we're looking for when we're racing and how to catch an oversteering car. Look for the camera sort of accelerate round. You're looking at your surroundings. Peripheral vision is very critical in this, because if you can spot the edges of the corners of the TV, if you can see that in your peripheral vision, you can actually see when the car starts to oversteer first before the center of the screen. Think about how anything spins, or how, you know, spin a bottle. The outside is moving faster than the inside, okay? In terms of it's got to get round. So think about it, right? If you can see the peripheral vision, the outskirts of the TV, of the edge, and you start to see that move, you can catch it quicker than if you're focusing so much on the centre. As you come up to Spoon now, you're going to see a lot of oversteering moments because the tyres are just gone at this point as we come into this corner. You can see it's wiggling all over the place. Just oversteer everywhere. I'm having to balance the throttle a lot. And remember, that's one of the critical things I mentioned last time with weight transfer. Balancing that throttle will reduce the amount of oversteer. And generally, if you want to catch oversteer, it's very simple, really. If you can spot it happening, come off the throttle, potentially, depending on the car and the situation. You don't want extreme weight transfer, of course. Potentially, as I've demonstrated in here, brake, tap the accelerator a little bit, generate understeer rather than oversteer. And hopefully that will save you. So a little bit on oversteer, a little bit on understeer in this video. I hope you have enjoyed this video as we go in the pits now, of course. Lots of little things that you can use there, hopefully, to catch an oversteery car. Lots of knowledge there on understeery cars. Again, it's everything we've talked about already in terms of the first few episodes. And again, thanks very much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next episode. Episode number 6.